about how to make another.
Fine. Okay. Now the Yerushalmi says in Maseches Yuma, Kol dor shelo nivna beis hamikdash biyamav kil nechrava biyamav. Any generation that did not witness the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, it's as if it was destroyed again in that generation. Now that's quite harsh. You would think that we were born into this. Yes, we didn't do this. We were 2,000 years ago and born into an impossible situation. So how could Chazal say a thing like that? Right? So the Rosh Yeshiva, Yaakov Warmik Zechron Livracha, used to say like this, a very simple law of nature is that things bounce back to their natural balance. That's why for every action there's a reaction, push back and put things where they were meant to be. Right? There's nothing more natural than having a Beis Hamikdash on earth. Right? The Saba Kosh Dira Batachtonim Kosh says he desires to have a dwelling place on earth. Bereshis B'Shul Yisrael Nikru Reshis B'Shul Atarjik Reshis. The whole world is for Klal Yisrael in the Torah, which the Hashras Hashchina is a direct result of that, which is the reason why as soon as Am Yisrael got the Torah, Kosh commanded on Melechas HaMishkan. It's a direct result, because once there's an Am Yisrael, and Am Yisrael has a Torah, so it's that causes that there has to be Hashras Hashchina on earth because there's a Torah on earth. So it means that to have a Beis Hamikdash on earth is as natural as any other law of nature. Right? And if the Beis Hamikdash is not back, it's because we must be exerting tremendous amount of force to bar its return, because nature should just heal. Right? So we need to understand, so we should try to not have to be here again next year. Right? To understand a little bit of what we're doing wrong. Everyone knows the famous stories of in the Gemara and Gittin on the series of events that lead up to Churban Abayis. There's a very interesting, and sad common denominator between them. So it starts off with Kamsa Bar Kamsa. So now Bar Kamsa, he's out for blood because he was publicly humiliated. So he goes to the Caesar and says, "Mordu b'chayudai." The Jews they've rebelled. So he says, how do I know? Maybe you're just making up. Send the carbon, see if they sacrifice it. And so he put a blemish. Some say in the lip, some say in the eyelid. Something which no guy would consider a blemish, but what can we do? It's pasul mizbeach. So the Am Yisrael is now faced with the dilemma. What do? Do we sacrifice the carbon? Or do we, or we don't, and we kill Bar Kamsa. All right, so there was one of the Tanoim there at the side. Look, we can't sacrifice the carbon because people might learn out of it a bad halacha that Baal Mum is carved the Gabe Mizbeach. We can't kill Bar Kamsa, right? Because people might learn from that to put a mum in kachim is a capital offense. Can't do anything. All right. So the Gemara says, "An v'tanusas Rav Schar ben Akulis echrivas beisenu sarfas echalenu v'glisinu ben ha'umos." His humility, right, is what caused the Churban Abayis. Now, I'm relying on the Gemara. I'm not big enough to judge. It says, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. Right?
Which part was a mistake?
They should have killed Bar Kamsa. He was a meiser. It's a halacha mefureshes. Right? He was too humble. Now, of course, too humble. What that means is, this particular Tana. Now, of course, what it means too humble. The Maharal explains is that his mind was taken over by the hashgacha because the gzer was already nigzar. That's what it means. He was very humble, yet he was totally mavatal himself, and therefore became an instrument because the gzer was nigzar already. We're going to discuss that a little bit more in depth because it comes up again that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai escapes. He got. They through a whole ruse they got him out of the city walls, and he speaks to Aspancianus, Vespasian, and so he said, "Why don't you come until now?" And I said, "Well, look, there's nothing I can do. The Biryonim, wouldn't let me out." So he told them, "Okay." So it's like if you have a snake around a barrel of honey, right? So you can't get to the honey, and the honey can't get out. You break the barrel. Rabbi Yochanan didn't know what to answer him. That's what the Gemara says. Gemara applied the pasuk, Meshiv chachamim achor, v'da'atam yisachel. Right? He reverses the chachamim, and he removes their knowledge, because it was a simple answer. Right? What do you mean? You take a pair of tongs, you take off the snake. Why do you have to break the barrel? You have to be machar Yerushalayim because the biryon, the snakes, don't let people in and out. Gemara says it. Then there's a machlokas in the Gemara whether, when he gave him 3 wishes, he should have asked for Yerushalayim. That's what it says, indeed. Didn't occur to him to ask for Yerushalayim. It applies the same pasuk. There's another Mando's Malamed Schus. No, he thought that if he would ask for it, he just wouldn't get it, so he'd come out with nothing. So he asked for the 3 things that he got, to save the family from Gamliel, to heal Rabbi Tzadok. So then we have another story right after that. The story of Marta Baisus, right? And so she's hungry. She's a very rich lady, hungry. Sends her servant. You get me the fine flour stuff. None left. All right, get me the plain. Comes back. None left. All right, get me the stuff, the whole wheat garbage, that stuff. Same story. All right, get me the barley stuff. Okay. And she died of starvation. Right? So you wonder, what were they thinking? What was she thinking? What was the guy thinking? He grabbed whatever there is. It's like 3 stories back to back. Tell you about a phenomenon that people's minds weren't working. See. But the truth is, you don't have to look so far back in history. Just 70 some odd years ago. The writing was on the wall that madman is going to take, he's going to annihilate the Jewish people. Chafetz Chaim screamed about it. Mind wasn't working. Right? Asked my father, why did the Jews escape from Germany? They didn't believe it would happen. Not only that, he thought all the Jews that Hitler was talking about were the Ostjuden, the Jews from the East, that the Yakkers looked down on them also. No. They didn't think what happened. No. Right? So why did you escape? So he told me. He was just 3 years old. His parents sent him on an errand. And the Hitler Youth with a German Shepherd, sickness dog him. He was eaten half alive. Survived Benes. And that's when the penny dropped. We got to get out of Germany. But that's what it took. It's an amazing thing. It's a strange phenomenon. They heard from people that. Well, first of all, that a sefer that I read. I can't remember the name of the sefer. So in the introduction, the author tells a little bit of his history. He was a yeshiva bacher that escaped from Poland to Hungary. As you know, the Nazis came to Hungary at the very end of the war. They thought that they were immune. They would, for whatever reason. So he says, he writes over there that he came to Hungary, and he was in the mikveh, with on Erev Shabbos, and whatever the conversation was over there, and he says, listen, you guys are, I was living in a dream world. I just came from Poland, and they're killing people like animals. So they slapped him across the face. Shut up.
That's what they did to you and me.
Yes?
My father's cousins did that also. They wouldn't believe.
Right. The thing is like this. The Gemara says, in the Sanhedrin, two things. Call me she'ein bo das l'sof golem mimkoma. Person who does not have das, in the end, will be exiled from his. He's going to lose his position. But it says on the other side, on the flip side, Kol mi sheyesh bo das ki'ilu nivne beis hamikdash biyamav. Person who, right, has das. For him, it's as if a beis hamikdash is standing. It's quite amazing. Obviously, we need to understand a little more what das is. That it has such the lack thereof causes you to go into Gulus. Having it is as if there's a Beis Hamikdash standing. We say cheresh shota b'katan, right? They're partial from mitzvahs because they don't have das. Look, a cheresh, I understand in their days they could not educate the deaf, right? Right? Shota, he's crazy. Got it. Right? Cotton. What? Jewish kid, bright kids. Bright kids. Villa going at the age of 6, no one could teach him anything anymore. In his own town. So it's called Avnar Das. How could it be? Obviously, Bardas doesn't have anything to do with IQ. Truth is, when Chazal talk about the simonim of a shaita, they're not talking about lack of intelligence. They're talking about insanity. He sleeps in a graveyard. He goes out alone at night. Types of things. The simonim of a shaita is not a person who's stupid. This person who's crazy.
So it's about being able to discern.
Yes. Because the idea is like this. Heard from my Rebbe Rav Nachum Lansky, who heard the name of Rav Hutner, Moshe, what it means to be, to be someone who's a lav bardas. You imagine that, Chas v'sholom, there's some type of tragedy. That a younger man dies and leaves a young, almana and yesenim. Right, so you can understand, the depressed atmosphere that there is in the Shiva house. So a guy walks in, with a, Hawaiian shirt, Bermuda shorts, Ray-Bans, and why is everyone here so glum? Let's turn on the lights. What's mitzvah gadol yos b'simcha, right? Right? God, if he killed him, it's got to be good for him because God's merciful, right? He's in a better place, and even if he's in hell, that's good for him also. I knew the guy; he wasn't much good. Hell is good for him. That's why, So, right? That's a person who has no das. What does that mean? Some of the things he actually said may actually be true, may actually make sense. It's not the time, it's not the place. He's detached from reality. That's what we call in this day reality challenged. detached from reality. Katanim, kids can be very, very bright. But that they'd also sell their mother for 5 cents. It's not. Yeah, there's like a sense of a balance, of what things to take seriously, what things not to take seriously. You call being, connected to reality, something that only age could bring. The shaita is not stupid. The shaita is crazy. Chazal write about, it's not a problem anymore because the shaitim are not Talmidei Chachamim, right? But we'll talk about it a little bit later. But the Chazal, it's a medrash, says Talmid Chacham she'ein bo das nevela toiva himena. Right? A Talmid Chacham that has no das, a carcass is better than him. Now, think about what's being said over here. He's a Talmid Chacham by Chazal standards, and ein bo das.
So is it sensitivity?
It's called being in touch with reality. And that's why Nevela Tova Imeno, some Mepharshim say, because at least the Nevela, Lakelv Tashlichon Oso. It's good for dog food. He's not good for that either. Right? Yeah, that's what the Mepharshim say. Yeah. Right? Kid, it's a brilliant guy. It's just, but listen, the man's got no. It means if he's out of touch with reality, it means his moral compass is off also. You can't trust him for all his brilliance. So. It's not, the shaita is not stupid, he's insane. And insanity means, or lack of das means being out of touch with reality. The Maral, the Sefer Yashar attributed to Rabbeinu Tam, and others have said that, as the pasuk says, Ki Adam Eitz HaSodeh. Man is like a tree. Except that difference is that we're upside down. These are our roots. Our head, our das are our roots. That's what keeps us rooted in reality. But truth is, paralleling the cosmos, like we learned in Nefesh HaChaim, that's how the olamas are set up also, like an upside down tree. The higher olamas are like the roots, and the lower olamas, branch out from there. And man is the same way. Our roots are our das. What do like the term das, means like also to know in the biblical sense. It means to be connected. It's not intelligence per se. Intelligence is just a piece of it, one of the components. But it's about, what is your perception of reality? What are you real with? Right? One could say it has to do with the conscience. Where are you? Where is your mind? Where is your heart? Where is it? And that's why Komi Shein Bo Das L'Sof Golem Imkoma. He loses his position if you are reality challenged. Of course, you're not going to hold on, keep a grip. You lose your grip on reality, so of course you will. You're not going to keep your position. But it goes a little bit deeper to, understand what a Beis HaMikdash is. But there's an interesting Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. And really the Hasidic Sfarim took it from him. Lamase. Like the Baal Shem Tov used to say, saying about where is a man? He's where his thoughts are. That's where he is. The Rambam Moreh writes that to the extent that a person thinks about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mida Kneged Mida, HaKadosh Baruch Hu thinks about him. And the more you have HaKadosh Baruch Hu on your mind, the more you're on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mind. He says that there's a real special hashgacha pratis on that person. So long as he thinks about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And to the extent that he never forgets about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, never forgets means he's always real with it. So it means he's always connected. To that extent, also, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never abandon him. But it goes the other way, says the Rambam. You forget about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mida Knagamida forgets about you, and you could, he writes, you could just die like a dog, be hit by a bus. You just don't deserve to be protected. If you could forget about the Ribbon Shalom like an animal, you get treated the same way. Now, the Beis HaMikdash on earth was was ongoing dvekus between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael.
I have a little bit of a problem with what you just said. In looking at our life and life in general, there have been some very hush-a-bit good people who have been taken in an instant like that.
Yes.
I'm thinking of someone who was killed in 9/11, Shimon Peter. There are people who you can't, how can you say, somebody who's devoted their life to Torah can still be taken like that, like a dog being shot, or, so... So where does that fit into what you just said?
Two things. First of all, the sin of ignoring God is a sin that carries consequences. If a person is...
But these are people who didn't ignore God.
Okay, that's not the only reason why a person dies.
Well,
Right?
I didn't
It's
know
not the only reason. It's not the only reason why a person dies. It's schar v'onesh, there's gzeros, kapor on him, kapor on the tzibur. It's not the only reason. But the amazing thing is that a person could, be vulnerable to the elements if he's not walking with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because you're expected to all the time. That's the chiddush over here. But there's so many reasons for a person to never be taken. It's not the only reason, but it's an amazing thing that you forget about the Ribbon Shalom. You should never forget about the Ribbon Shalom.
I'm 40 years old, who was busy with Klal.
Yeah, but we're still learning from Rabbi Kerzner 40 years later.
Look, the Ribbon Shalom, there's like more than one reason to die. It's not. I'm just saying, but you have to understand what's being said over there. That you ignore HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He ignores you also. Mida k'neged mida. But it's like we said, it's not the reason. It's not the only reason people die. There's many other things that require kapara. Many other things. It's just an example to understand that a person has to be rooted with HaKadosh Baruch Hu constantly. Severing that connection alone makes a person vulnerable. But there are other reasons that can make a person vulnerable. Now, when there was a Beis HaMikdash on earth, all right, this idea of Dvekus, wasn't a theory. What do you mean? You could say, Hashchina Shora B'Yisrael. The Shechina dwells in Klal Yisrael. And everyone could come 3 times a year. Liros es Pnei Adon Hashem Elokei Yisrael. See HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This wasn't an idea. This wasn't a feeling. This was reality. This was reality. And the Hasidim say that the Kedushas Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, he left his wife for a few years to go learn by the Mezritcher. He came back after a few years, and so his father-in-law said, You left your wife and kids on me to take care of. Well, let's hear one thing you learned in Mezrich. Let's hear. He says, I learned that there's a Ribbon Shalom. So what? 3 years I had to feed your wife and children. You should hear that there's a Ribbon Shalom. Everyone knows that. Yeah, as a matter of fact, let's call him the Shiksa. Maria. Do you know that there's a God? Yeah, of course, sir. So he said like this, she's just saying it. I know it. Right? Totally real. And that's quote to be a Yodea. You know that there's a Ribbon Shalom. Right? To be a Yodea. Kol mi sheyesh bo das, kilo nivna beis hamikdash biyamav. Right? Because that person is really clinging to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So now he's just one person, so that's why he can't change the whole world, and there should be a Beis Hamikdash for the Klal, because he's just one person. He's not a critical mass yet. But for him, Kilo Nivna Beis Hamikdash B'Yamav, he's real. He's real with it. So the Beis Hamikdash is like the, as we call it, the cosmic das, right? Right, the connection, like Adam Yada Schava Ishto, it's that cosmic connection between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that every individual has it, mikoach das, and when there's a critical amount of people that have that, so then, it changes the world, and the whole world knows that there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Knows means, real with it, connected. They say seeing is believing. That's not true. Seeing is knowing. It's as real as anything. So now you can understand it goes the other way. That when there's Siluk HaShechina, the Das gets affected. Das is the midah of our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? And when, sadly, a certain critical amount of Jews stop being real with it, so midah k'neged midah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is misal k'shechina. But what happens is, as a result, is that the whole midah of Das exists for this purpose. The midah of Das exists for the purpose of giving us Teveikus and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why this capacity exists. Das is our perception of reality. And of course, with perception of reality, there's a lot of things that go into that. Including your moral compass. Because, how do you view reality? What do you view as important? That's what makes man more than an animal. We say we're a bardas. It's not because animals are stupid. Animals are not stupid. Right? They don't have a moral compass. They don't know the Ribbon Shalom the way we do. It's not, the difference between us and them is not IQ. That's not what makes us better than them. What makes us better than them is our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we have the midah of Das for that purpose. So when Am Yisrael is, God forbid, Kfar Nigzor Gzeira, so the midah of Das has not been used for what it's supposed to be used for its real intended purpose. So there's a Siluk HaDas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu removes the Das. And even our leaders, even if they've done no sin of their own, but because there's a Gzeira on the Klal, they're also affected. Right? There's a Siluk HaDas. And that's when you know that it's time to worry. That means Kfar Nigzor Gzeira. Gzeira is already said. That's what the Ber Mayim Chaim has a sefer called the Sha'ar Tefillah. And he quotes the pasuk Sha'ar. Hashbed lev amazeh, v'aznav hachbed, ve'enav hasha. These people, their ears are closed, right? Their eyes are closed, right? Their hearts are stuffed up, right? So he says, it's not just the Navi complaining. It's not just the Navi complaining about the state of Am Yisrael. With those words, the Gzera was issued, that the eyes will be closed, right? The ears will be closed. That's what Rashi means, right, in the Parshas Vayechi. Lama Parshas Ustuma. The fish nistmu enem v'libam shel Yisrael mitzar sashir titzchil l'shabdam. The Parshas Sasum. There's no break between Vayigash and Vayechi, because the hearts and eyes of Am Yisrael got closed because of the shibud.
Yeah, but when you said the Navi said that, so was he Makatrig against Bnei Yisrael that
No, he was issuing the Gzera,
the Navi issued the Gezerah?
meaning on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Now, of course, you have to ask a question on that Rashi. Right? It says, this is my name, V'libam Shel Yisrael. It's not true. Right? Because the Pasuk says in Shmos, Vayomas Yosef, V'chol Echav, V'chol Adarahu, right? Until the Shvatim died. Right? The Shibud didn't start. Then after that, V'yakam Melchar Shel Yisrael, and Parshas like he's talking about Yaakov Avinu dying. The answer is like this. It starts from the eyes and heart being closed. That's where it starts from. The physical oppression that kicked in later, as a matter of time. But it starts with the mind and heart being closed. That's where it starts from. And that started from the time Yaakov Avinu died. Nistimu eneim v'libam shel Yisrael. Right? That's where it all starts from. Right? It starts, originally from our closing our eyes and our ears to what we know is true. Right? Ignoring what we don't want to hear. Right? But then after that, HaKadosh says, fine, you want that way, I'll give it to you. You want to close your eyes, you want to close your ears to what the Nevi'im are telling you and are warning you about, no problem. You get what you wish for. You get what you want. You get eyes closed. You get your ears closed.
So is it impossible to do tshuva then, or just hard?
It's just very hard. So that's what the Ber Mayim Chaim over there goes on to say. That there's an interesting, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was always a Rachaman. There's always Rachamim in it. Because there's something interesting to, think about the Jewish people. We've been through something, been through stuff. No other nation, they're complaining that they were less than 20 years ago they were slaves, and still complaining about it. Am Yisrael's been through, much worse and even much more recent, and somehow, we just managed to pick up the pieces and nothing. So says the Ber Mayim Chaim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he put us asleep, we became really thick-skinned. And there was a certain divine grace in that also. That's how we're making it through. We should be seriously traumatized, and then because that's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even his Gzeros have a certain rachamim hidden within them. And this is how we make it through. We are heavily sedated. That's what he writes. But he says like this, but that's what Rachel Imenu. That's what scared her the most. He proves it. How he proves it? That what scared Rachel Imenu most was, said, it's like he gives a marshal, a kid is going into surgery, right? And the mother's worried. So they're worried that he won't feel a thing. He won't feel a thing. He said, that's what I'm worried about. He may never wake up. That's what we're worried about. What's going to wake them up? You put them to sleep so they could go through the pain, right? Not be traumatized. What's going to wake them up? So he writes, "Yesh sochar fulasach." So he has a yesh sochar as gematria tefillah. That if a person really wants to, when he davens, HaKadosh will give him siyata shema to wake up. Really be there, really have his whole, what is, the mind that's generally slumbering to be totally engaged. That's what he writes. Yeah, but that's the problem, and that's the apathy. Is once the Xeris Nigzar. It's, even our leaders. Like the pasuk says, "Neviel lo matzu chazon." Right, the Nevi'im don't get nevu anymore. But of course it's our fault because we chose that way. If you want to ignore the truth, right, you want to turn your eyes and ears away from what you're being taught, right? So of course it says, fine, you want that, you get that. I'm going to close your eyes, I'm going to close your ears, and it'll go. You can't have it halfway. You can't have it halfway. You want it, you got to go with it all the way. So you'll see the writing on the wall. The Jews are about to be exterminated. Yeah, it's not going to respond. You're going to turn the eyes. You can't have it the way you want it. You want to live life that way, that you would block out the truth? Fine. Have it your way. So you have danger right in front of your face, and you won't run. That's what you want, that's what you get.
So I have a question. Isn't it almost like not a favor, the Erech HaPayim, that we don't get little petch along the way, and instead of the biggie that comes when we've accumulated so many Averis?
There's a trade-off, but there's no other way. If we get it immediately, we wouldn't be able to get up again.
If we got little stuff we didn't get up?
No, if we get it all in one shot, we can't get up again. It has to be spread up.
Ever since Mechiras Yosef, we've been getting it,
So-
right? Regal Zahav.
So here's the thing. Particularly nowadays, Chazal say, Cain killed Hevel, because he thought he would inherit the whole world. And also, relatively speaking, Hevel relative to Cain was, even though it was before Matan Torah, was sort of the difference between Jew and non-Jew. Hevel, as it were, one quasi-Jewish. He got rid of Hevel. He thought he would inherit the world. Comes Esav and says, Shaita Cain. Because, he killed Hevel. He didn't realize Adam Rishon is, got back there with Chava and they had chase. I'm not going to make the same mistake. Yikavu Yemei Evel Avi, Vargas Yaakov Achi. Meaning he was planning to kill. He was going to assassinate Yitzchak. So he can have more kids. So Yikavu Yemei Evel. Cain Paro said, Shaita Esav. Right? You know what he's doing, right? Because while he's waiting to assassinate Yitzchak, Yaakov goes off, and to base Lavan has the 12 tribes. I'm not going to make the same mistake. Call ben Yoro Tashlichu, v'chol bas techayu. We're throw, kill them all the males. Right? Came home and said, Shoitei Apara. More. Right? Because you take care of the women, you have to take care of the women also, because they were mashadal, the men to and have more kids, so. No, that's not the way to do it. So Haman says, so it's not rezoking tough and nashim, yom echad. That's the way to do it. You got to kill them all. No, leave no survivors. So comes Gog, lost in love, but it's not lost in love anymore. It's now. But as the Medrash said, lost in love will come Gog and say, Shreita Haman. Yeshem patron gadol b'shamayim. They have a great patron in heaven. You have to take down God first. Right? That's what Paul says. Nozdu al Hashem val Mashiach. Tell him. First it's a war against God, then we take care of the anointed ones. We get rid of the Klal, so after we get rid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? So that's the Shloah HaKadosh. How do you take down God? What do you do? You fill the world with apikorsis. And you make God irrelevant. Right? That's how you kill God. Not quite bad, An irrelevant God is a dead God. It's not relevant anymore. You break people's dveikus. Totally. Right? We're there. The war started. Right? Right. Leviticus is one of the dirty words, the God of the Old Testament. It's horrible what's going on. It's horrible. And with total impunity, people speak against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, speak against the Bible. Right? 10 Commandments, can't be displayed publicly. The war started. And it's only a matter of time, and of course, but kvar nigzur gzeira, so people should be freaking out. People should really be freaking out. That that these liberals are willing to spill blood. Any conservative speaker who comes to Berkeley has to run for his life. It's with impunity. Talk about blowing up the White House, and it's okay. No one gets charged for treason. There's normal countries. Once upon a time, it was called treason, high treason. That's fine. It goes on, because the liberal agenda. People ask me, what's with these liberals? It's the Fegelach, and the minorities, and the Muslims. Muslims, right? These are people who are, most anti this and most anti everything that their agenda stands for. Right? What's wrong? Answer is the Yetzer Hara has no principles. You think he's a man of principle? Like it says, I saw you daven good yesterday, so I'm not letting you watch this schmutzika movie because you're not a sincere Russia. You think he talks that way? The man's got no principles. He'll take what he can get, right? And he doesn't no problem playing this side of the coin and that side of the coin. Whatever is there to tear down all that's good and decent and tear down Klal Yisrael, what are they thinking? They're not thinking. Not thinking. Because people who think are Davik and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Das. So they're not thinking. They're not thinking. They're going with the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara has no principles. He gets you from any angle. He doesn't care. It's not like this angle. He uses this angle, and principle he won't. He uses any angle. Well, he has no principles. He doesn't care. Right? People ask, why do kids go off the derech? It's the poverty. No, it's the affluence. No, it's this. No, it's that. Morons. It's the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara is everywhere. The Yetzer Hara is everywhere. You find him in the affluence, you have him in the poverty. Messiah Shem writes it, this world is a battlefield. And the battle's in front and back, right, left. The Yetzer Hara is everywhere. Kids go off the derech because of the Yetzer Hara. And he is everywhere. It's not because of this, it's because of that. But when did we teach our kids about Milchemes HaYetzer? When did we teach anybody about that? Fighting your Yetzer Hara. Now, once upon a time, just keeping halacha, you had to be prepared to starve to death. Keep kashrus. 50 years ago, there were days you go hungry because there's nothing kosher to eat. Right? So, just keeping normative halacha was, really built a person's spiritual muscles. Right? Because there was serious Milchemes HaYetzer. What do we do today? Not you. You guys are good. Me. What do I do today? Right? We cut deals with the Yetzer Hara. We negotiate with him. Fress, like pigs. Fress. Now, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. Fine, but that's the problem. That's why we're in Gulus, because we turn our ears away from what we don't want to hear. Very second beer halacha in Mishnah Berurah. From his brings to the Sefer HaChinuch. Do you know that if something is 100% glatt kosher, right? But you're not hungry, right? You're not feeling weak. You're not feeling depressed. You really don't need it. You really don't need it. And you eat it anyway, just out of pure taiva. You're over on Isser Daraisa of Lo Sasur Achil Vavchem Bachrei Nechem. You're not supposed to give in to the Yetzer Hara. You're not supposed to give in. You're not supposed to give in, even when it's not technically a violation of the law. Because you're increasing his leverage in reality. You're giving him more territory. You're giving him more turf. So now we talk about we want a base of mikdash on earth. We want, which is pure sterile space. or the Sitra Achra is, not Karshru. So we learned something in Nefesh HaChaim, right? Perak Daled, right? One dirty thought in the heart does more cosmic damage to what Titus did in the base Kodesh HaKadoshim. So now, when the Fegelach are out there marching, and it's a terrible Chilul Shem Shamayim, and I don't know how long Rosh is going to tolerate this, because the Bnei Noach are mitzvah on this also, right? This is not serious. A person should be really shaking. How long is the Rebbe going to tolerate this open rebellion against Malchus Shamayim? How long? So at least one thing Donald did for us, right? Because he lit the fuse, and now we see that the liberals are choshed on shvichas damim. So at least we could say to the Rebbe, the reason why we didn't go out and counter protest is because they would have killed us, and they would. So Baruch Hashem, it's a limud tzchus on Am Yisrael that we have a good reason why we weren't meiche. Because Chazal tells us, yesh b'yarim michos ha'rachah nitfasa so hold. Right, we're guilty if we could protest and we don't. All right, Baruch Hashem, we have a heter because they'll kill us. They are choshed on shvichas damim. Oh, this guy, they'll kill you with kindness. They'll make sure you're dead. All right, Baruch Hashem. Right? But what are we doing as a countermeasure? What are we doing? Right? What are we doing? So okay, so I can't. With all the freedom of speech is it's not really, it's only for the leftist agenda. There's freedom of speech. All right. So what am I doing? So let's say in my personal Beis HaMikdash, because I'm a walking Beis HaMikdash, like we learned in Nefesh HaChaim. What am I doing? It should be that if there's such a horrible, rebellion against Malchus Shamayim outside, that I should be doing something in my inner universe, my personal Beis HaMikdash, right, to clean it up a bit. Yeah. People, the Ra is rampant. So if we can't actually take up arms against it, maybe we should. I don't know. The Chafetz Chaim held that when Stalin rose to power, Jews just go to the kitchen, take a knife, take a fork, go, charge. Yeah. This is documented in a few places. So the other Rosh Yeshiva in Radin, Moshe Lindinsky, asked him, Rebbe, we'll come to the border. They have these things called machine guns. They'll just mow us down. You think I'm stupid? I know that. Right? But maybe the Mesiras Nefesh will do something to weaken the Sitra Achra in the world. We do nothing. The Sitra Achra runs rampant. Right? Okay. So another story in the same sefer says that the Baruch Ber heard the same thing, and he went to the kitchen, he took a fork. He said, okay, Rebbe, I'm going. He says, Baruch Ber, it's too late. We missed the opportunity. Right? So out there, the God of the Old Testament, right? Leviticus, right? Dirty words. What are we doing? What are we doing to fight back for the covenant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We want Galei Kvod Malchus Chaleinu. So what are we doing? Huh? And you don't understand? All you need is one guy to open their big mouth. That wearing your tzitzis out is called mitzvahs Hashem, which includes those mitzvahs in Leviticus. And you need one figure to say, when I see Jews, it's that I'm deeply offended, right? Because it's all those 613, including those over there. That they'll come for us. So wearing tzitzis will be called a microaggression, they call it. Right? You don't see that coming. A guy refuses to bake, and oil also busha also klima. That's dafka goy. Even Avodah Zarah stood up for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He gets a knas. He won't bake a cake for a fegel wedding. Right. Where are we? You understand that the apathy is a sign that nigzer gzeira kvar. You can't seriously want a Beis HaMikdash if you are content with the world as it is. If you're not really severely agitated at the way things are run. That's what it means. Kol misabu yishvaim zochav b'simchasa. To be mourning is like not feeling sorry for yourself. You understand that tzara shechina. said the world can't, wasn't meant to be this way. Right? It's the world is in a state of rebellion against its creator. Yeah. Yeah. Our situation is not good. It's not just apathy, it's like we said, there are certain things that are just off the radar totally, and that's like we mentioned, Milchemes HaYetzer, it's off the radar. Kids don't know what it is anymore. They know what it is to say no. Just tell them, even though it's mutter, but say no. Don't give it to your tithers. Just don't give it. There's it could go on. You see these from events, and the amount of food and mindless entertainment, all glad kosher. But you're sending a message, right? The Yitzhar could have whatever he wants under certain terms. So how do you expect people to be Omer Ben Yisrael? They never built up those muscles. Never built up those muscles. And you could be sure that the problem with the rampant mental illness, listen to what I'm telling you, the same emotional muscles that it takes to control the Yitzhar, those are the same muscles that it takes to control mental illness. That you could push impulses to the side and keep everyone's got bad memories. Everyone's had trauma. It's caused natural events. The question is, where is it? Is it point center, or it's it's to the side, back of the mind, buried. When you let your impulses or your fears control you, that's when you're mentally ill. When everyone's got them, but the question is, where are they? So you have to understand something. When there was a base of Mikdash on earth, taking up point center of reality, right? And that's what Chazal tell us, that Yerushalayim is in the center of Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael is the center of the globe. The world's round. Every place is the center. It means like this. It means cosmically the center of reality. Right? So when the Shekhinah is in the center, that means the Sitra Achra, even when it existed, it was on the periphery. And when a person has a proper tzelem, and only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in his heart, his Meshigasin are on the periphery. And that's when the tzelem is standing. And the tzelem we learned is parallel to the Beis HaMikdash. It's not a coincidence. Ever since they were teaching that man is descended from monkey, that mental illness also increased. The tzelem, which runs parallel to the Beis HaMikdash, like we learned. When you have a Kadosh Baruch Hu in your heart, and you're connected, there's Ribbon Shalom. That's where you're rooted. That's where you're anchored. That's where your anchor is. So the Meshigasin are on the periphery, and they're under control. All right, no tzelem, then your Meshugasim could take up point center of your persona. Parallel to Shualim Hilchubo. The Sitra Achra sits, where the Harabayas is. Taking control of point center of reality. Milchemes HaYetzer, you push your desires to the side, that's the muscle that pushes all impulses to the side, including insecurities, including trauma. Mankind doesn't know what that is anymore. They don't know. So, of course, it's mental illness. You don't know how to control your mind, and you can't control your thoughts. So, of course, you walk around afraid, frenzied, whatever. But there's something else, it's got to be said before it's too late. We learned that when we learn Torah, so the neshama sparks. That's what causes sparks in the neshama, and then it augments the intelligence, and of course has a trickle-down effect on the ruach and the nefesh, like we learned. What type of learning does it? What do you think? We say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, Barasi Yisar, Barasi Torah. Right? There's a lot of learning going on. But Yetzer Hara is doing well. He's doing well. Because the pshat is like this. You know, any thinking person has to ask the following question. Right? The Gemara it's a difficult book. Before we get to it, years ago, one time I went to a Tzanzer Tish. Yeah, well, it was Salshus, I was in Kiryat Tzanz, Tanya. And the Rebbe said something like this. He told the story that, one of the big tzaddikim of earlier generations took on sigufim. He took on self-affliction, right? Tanesim, and he wore sackcloth, and whatever, all forms of self-affliction, to purify himself. And of course, it takes a toll on a person's health and a person's ability to concentrate. So after 2 years, when he finished the regiment, so he, got back to the old grind and went back to the base medrash, and he says, "What have I done? Right? All the 2 years of sigufim, when you're walking around, minimal ability to concentrate, right? So all of it wasn't worth it. There's nothing that kills the Yetzer Hara better than Gemara and Taisus." This is Tzanzer Rebbe talking, and in Tzanz there's no nonsense, And he said right there, drop the Chassidus for him, just take Gemara and Taisus. Ravina and Ravashi wrote a pretty hard book. It's not, Gemara is not very user-friendly. It's not, it's tremendous strings of reasoning, dialectic, aside from the difficult language. It's a complicated book, and even after you learn it, it's unless you really know how to learn well and you have to cross-reference, you don't even know what the halacha is. You have to, it involves a great deal of research, and why. What did Ravina Ravashi, why couldn't they write straight? So there's some fool, two brothers in Borough Park, wherever they live, I'm sure they're self-proclaimed experts in Ramchal, right? Say, the Klippas, Sitrach was very strong, and, Ravina Ravashi were barred from writing, a straightforward book, because Sitrach was just so strong. Right. And now, nowadays, everything was made so simple. It's Orosh HaMashiach. Right? So after I was forced to listen to that, the next day I was by my Rebbe, Moshe Shapiro, and he took a swing at me. Thank God he missed. He was very angry. And he said, "And you sat and you listened to that, and you sat and you listened to that." Right? If Ravina and Ravashi didn't do what they've done, right, Yiddishkeit would have gone obsolete years ago. They were preserving a method. And they were preserving a method on purpose, to force you to build your mental muscles. Right? The power, to do the research and to do the calculating and to do the cross-referencing. Right, which gave us the power, right, pull precedents out of something that was written for an agrarian society and pull out precedents to paskin on modern technology. They knew what they were doing. They had to make things deliberately complicated to build our mental muscles. Right? And when you work hard, that's when the neshama kicks in. That's why there's a halacha of amelus batorah. Right? Because the proficiency that kept Torah relevant for all generations, right? And the type of what the Tzanzer was talking about, there's nothing better for you than Gemara. That type of hard work, that's what causes the neshama to spark And that's what caused it to bring light to the Ruach, and it has a purifying experience, and it's better than all the Sigufim. Now, in our days, right, something happened, right? So, and a thinking person should ask himself, why didn't Rashi do it? Why didn't Rashi do it? Obviously, it's not the right thing to do. It's not the right thing to do, right? The Gemara shouldn't be made readable like a newspaper. And if it was meant, in the agreement that was made with the Gedolim decades ago, right? It's only for beginners. It's only for Bali Tshuva. No one else should be touching it. Okay? No one's going to go the hard way if there's an easy way. You take the path of least resistance. And that's why 12 years of school, right? And the average yeshiva bacher cannot make a laning because he never gets off his training wheels, never gets off his crutches. And we are rapidly moving into a situation that in 10 years' time, no one will have the intellectual acumen to paskin a shaila because they don't build those mental muscles. It's been made way too easy. Aside from the spiritual quality, there's no Mesiras Nefesh anymore. The neshama doesn't spark. And that spark in the neshama is a certain experience of your personal Hashras HaShechina, your personal Beis HaMikdash. It doesn't exist anymore.
How do we do that? As ladies?
Everyone, Tikkun HaMidas. Milchemes HaYetzer. You can't be serious about wanting a Beis HaMikdash on earth if you're not leading your own life in a way that parallels a Beis HaMikdash. Right? Hashem tzilcha yamecha. We learned this in Nefesh HaChaim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he runs the world as a mirror. He's holding up a mirror to you. If you live like a Beis HaMikdash, you'll have a Beis HaMikdash. You don't live that way. We are in dire straits. We are in serious dire straits. Right? And the whole industry is, in a certain way, an accomplice to it. It just has to be said that we have to. There's a great deal of inspiration, Jewish inspirational videos, and then these tours, and thus. And we're living in a fool's dream because there's no substance there. There's euphoria, but there's no substance. You could be sure that when Yirmiyahu Navi had to compete with Hananiah ben Azor, right, for the people's trust, who did better? Hananiah ben Azor, Israel. He had a message of love. He probably did kumzizis by the Kimzer Tzadikim, right? Yirmiyahu was telling them, about real work. Nothing anyone wanted to hear. But you don't understand something that, there's a certain rule about how the human mind works, Now, it's possible for a person to have total intellectual clarity, and by trickle-down effect, right, his emotions get involved also. Like the Rambam writes, in Hilchos Yisodei Torah, Yizborim Mazel, you want to feel Ahava, you want to feel Yira, contemplate, Godless Sabari, think. And then the emotions kick in. But that's when you start with the intellect first, with critical thinking first. So there's a trickle-down effect from the Shema to Ruach to Nefesh. Right? And it could be a very emotionally satisfying experience, be full. When there's Das, it's a full experience. It is. But that's when, the Das, it has to be Das, not Chochmah Bina. You have to be real with it. And when you're real with it, it generates feelings also. And it could be fully emotionally satisfying. Right? But there is another rule, that when you start with emotions, right, the mind goes numb. Right? If you start with Das, not Chochmah Bina, Das, being real with something, so the cognizance could drag the feelings along. If you start with the euphoria, the mind goes numb. no one wants to hear critical thinking. It ruins the mood. Ruins the mood. It's serious. It's a serious problem. This is very serious. There's Jewish entertainment. It's mind numbing. Our kids are these music videos from this mushkos and that mushkos. Well, they have beards, so what? And they bring goyim to break dance in the background. It is amazing. We have mind numbing culture, our own mind numbing, and when the mind is numb, that's the Yetzer Hara's playing field. He likes that when people don't think. And he doesn't care. We said he has no principles. Even if you're feeling, for me, feelings, he's good. He's good. Yeah, because if you're not thinking, twirl you around however he wants. Main things you shouldn't think. A few 10,000s of people go every year, somewhere in the Ukraine. Right? Do you know? We're going to learn in Nefesh Chaim, Shar Gimel Paraktes. You say to a tzaddik, I want to cling to you. That's Avodah Zarah Mamish. One of the leading Dveka songs is Machnisi Arachamim. Do you know, according to the Rambam, the Maral, Korban Nesano, I go on. It's all, that keta is Avodah Zarah. All right, so there's a heter to say it. Right? It's one of the leading Dveka songs. Right? You're not allowed to address anything other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And people will come down totally buzzed. And the Yetzer Hara is laughing the whole way. Right? You got people to be Ovid Avodah Zarah Mamish. But people are inspired. People are inspired. I mean, this is serious. This is serious. Right? You have to really, the person have to realize we are seriously asleep. Our moral compass is totally off. Right? We're animals. We just go with our gut. We go with, whatever is, we assume if it's inspiring, it must be good. Let me tell you, from Nefesh Chaim, Rav Chaim Volozhin. Right? The story goes that once a guy came to Volozhin collecting tzedakah. Right? And and he had an unbelievable sob story. He made such a nice impression as a decent person. He had never very hard times. Cleaned up in Volozhin. Everyone gave him money, except for Rav Chaim Volozhin. Came to Rav Chaim Volozhin and said, "Get lost, out of my face." Pella, Chaim Volozhin. I said, "It can't." So, a little bit later, the story came out. The guy was a Meshumid, right? Converted, and he was a missionary. And whatever he didn't take for himself went to the church. Right? So I went to Rav Chaim Volozhin and asked him, all right, you have Ruach HaKodesh, right? And he said, nah, I have common sense. It's simple. Right? The Yetzer Hara wasn't stopping anybody. He was doing too well. It means the Yetzer Hara wasn't interfering. The Yetzer Hara was good with it. Meaning to say, what's popular, chances are if it's popular and it's what really goes, chances are it's probably not good. Yetzer Hara, it means Yetzer Hara has no problem barring it. That's all. He was doing too well. It couldn't have been right. What's popular just means that the Yetzer Hara has no problem with it. We are in serious dire straits. We're not working with our minds anymore. Nigzur Gzera, there's Silu Kadas. There's a featured speaker. Right? He's at every single major Jewish event. The event's not complete if that guy's not there. Right? So a woman who comes to my shul asks me, so again, where's the exact source that Binyamin from the Shvatim was a werewolf? I said, excuse me? I said, what? Yeah. I heard in the share, Binyamin was a werewolf.
Binyamin was a what?
A werewolf.
I don't. There's no such thing. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say about the most simple Jew. I want to shift a cup. How do you mind? No, this rabbi, Said it. Right? I said, I don't believe it. No, he said it. So, so she gave me the link. Yeah, sure enough, a man who takes himself way too seriously. That bashgacha pratis, he had to go to the bathroom between his rabbin, his Rashtu and Rabbeinu Tamsvil, and someone showed him in a book. It says Binyamin was a werewolf. And he banged on the table. This is Teda. So, everyone understands that one of the shiftei kol wasn't a werewolf. There's no such thing as werewolves, right? Now, because he saw it in a book written, in Hebrew letters, doesn't mean it's true, right? But the amazing thing is, the crowd was brain dead. No one got up and protested. No one walked out. Why? Because he said it from sound bites. So this is Teda. Didn't sound modern Orthodox. It sounded like one of Unzer. The sound bites were right. It's a pachad. It's a pachad. This man is no das, and he's one of the top featured speakers. It's frightening, and the audience is brain dead because he says it in a formal way. The sound bites were right. It's the same genius. He had his own. He's a Yodea Das Elyon, right? So he had his own take on why the Sassoon children were burnt alive. Shem Yerachim, right? So okay, so he says that he learned Zohar. I started reading, reading up on this person's material. Right? I started reading, and he learned Zohar Motzei Shabbos, because that's when he's tahor and he's ready for Zohar. So. Obviously, only in Motzei Shabbos, and not for too long of a time, obviously, right? Because as he opened up, he says, and he saw Tochazi, come see. The Zohar was calling to me, come see. Zohar doesn't talk that way, right? There's not 2 pages that you could go by in Zohar without seeing the term Tochazi. It's the most common term in Zohar, right? So, seriously, reality challenged, and he's a featured speaker. And I'm sorry, we have to know we're in great danger. We're in great danger. We're going with sound bites. We're going with things that sound from, Let me ask you something, right? Right? What about Din Torah? Here in America, situations, from in, go to court. Like that, it's an Isser Chomer. You have to go to Bezdin. It's called a Chil Hashem. It's called that when we go to secular court, it's like we give covet to their gods. Right? Because we give them, authority over us. And you want a Beis HaMikdash. We read yesterday, Tzion b'mishpat tipada. Right? And we don't care about Din Torah. Right? Kol dayan shedayan so maaser shutav shakosh ma'aser bereishis. Chazal tell things about a dayan that beats out Din Torah. Things like the Beis HaMikdash. He's fixing the world, being masher the Shechina in the world, right? We're so worried about the Puranius, right? So let's say we could get people fired up about there'll be another Holocaust, this and that, right? So Chazal tell us im yesh din lamata ein din yored lamala. If you do things al pi din on earth, you don't have to have midas hadin come down from heaven, right? And people go to secular court like nothing, but they dinim are corrupt. So fix it. Get 3 frum Jews to do an arbitration for you. You can't go to secular court. But all these guys, they'll go to these kumsitzen. These kumsitzen are worthless. But not only that, they are deceptive. It is such a pachad. That there's a great deal of euphoria, but that's animalistic. That you go with the feelings as opposed to going with your das. So basically, what is really correct, not what your society is willing to approve, not what makes you feel good, not what makes you feel frum. What does the Rebbe Shalom really want? Not what makes you feel good. All right? We'll end off with one point. It's something horrific, and it's time to wake up. Right? This time, 12 years ago. Is that long ago already? Wow. Right? a horrible thing happened. Nafal Davar B'Yisrael, right? The Girush of Gush Katif. Horrific. No, horrific from every standpoint. Right? Jews being chased out of their homes, giving land, unilaterally without getting anything in return, right? And then, now they're launching missiles from the territory that was given. It was horrific, So, and there was no stopping the train, right? Society was gripped by an insanity. Sharon, he had the Justice Department on his tail. He had to break left quick. And whatever, he was a charismatic guy. And that's the thing. No one was thinking. Even the Mizrahi wasn't. They got into that government. They helped that government rise to begin with. Even though Sharon said about Hitnat Kud, he spoke about it from day one. Yeah, they were in with him also. He won't do it. It won't really happen. It was like everything we talked about. People weren't thinking. There was no stopping the train. But here's the amazing thing. Then this should be a Musar Haskell. It's frightening. And now that, people now make money from it, and sell these videos. And it's the most appalling thing when you think about it. It's the greatest insult to human intelligence. So you had on the day of the expulsion an impossible situation, right, of Jew versus Jew. Irreconcilable. No way to reconcile this, right? Everyone should be doing serious soul searching. Where are we headed? What's our direction? What is Tzahal about? How much can we put, faith we could put that the secular establishment will bring Mashiach? Everyone, both sides of the fence had some serious soul searching to do. It was a crisis, a serious crisis, right? They found a way forward. They danced together. They sang, and they danced, and they sell these videos. On the floor, they did a kumsitz together, and they danced them to the buses. And I was thinking to myself, Rebbe Shem, what's happened to us? Could we have done this with the Nazis? Have a little kumsitz, and they'll dance us to the gas chambers. Now, of course not, because that's just too extreme. But it means like this. What you have to think is that we could turn our minds off. They found a way to shut the mind off in a airy-fairy way. We shut the mind off. That's how they dealt with it. We really have to watch ourselves, right? There's a lot of things that are from style, and it's mind-numbing, and it's distracting us, and it's taking us away from what we really have to do. And the Yetzer Hara, he's got no problem with that. We said he has no principles. You could feel from as you want. If you're doing Avodah Zarah and you're not really thinking, and you're not really learning, you're feeling. You're not really doing real work. He's happy. Feel as from as you want. Because it's all about feeling, right? The Christians are doing a better job than we are. And the Muslims are doing a better job than we are. It's about giving euphoria. That's why there are millions of them, hundreds of millions of them, and just a couple million of us. Not even, us, Shomer Torah. They're doing a much better job in providing euphoria. That's why they have much higher membership. Right? But it's not about euphoria. It's about truth. Right? And that's what the Nevi'im have said. I don't want the karbanis. Shiftu yas riva mana. I want real justice. I don't want protexia. I want justice. I want real work. I want limud Torah. I want real dvekas. Right? I don't need rituals. Right? And we want to make sure that we're not going to be here again next year. I'm sure. I know. All these Tisha B'Av programs. Right? They probably start playing the next one. As far as I know. Back in the olden days, they used to put the Kinas in Geniza. After, the Rebbe Shem won't tolerate this Gulus anymore. Because people were, sickened, unaccepting of life in Gulus, unaccepting of a world without HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you think it's normal, Rebbe Shem says that's normal, that's what you're going to stay with. Right? You want to turn your eyes and ears away from the truth, I'll close them for you. And then you won't see what's coming. It's Mida Keneged Mida. It's time to wake up. You want to get out of Gulus, it's time to wake up. There's an active war against the Rebbe Shem and against everything that's holy. What part are you going to take in it? in the counterbout. Gog is already coming to cut off the whole world from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to take down our great patron in heaven. What are you doing? Right? It's time for countermeasures. Time to wake up. And if we don't, you'll be sure. Right? Mark my words. If we don't wake up, right, they're going to start putting Fruma Yidden in concentration camps because we provoke people. We offend people with our kippas and our tzitzis. We're the people, they're going to be, do you deny? Will you say that what's written in Leviticus is obsolete? You know? You'll be beaten. It's happening already. It's happening already. Right? And if it's not striking panic, it's because far nigzur gzera and there's silu kadas. It's time to wake up. Rebbe should help. When you truly wake up, Ramchal writes in Das Tvulas, if only a certain critical amount of Jews would believe, be real with the truth, Mashiach comes like that. It's not hard. It's not hard to bring the Beis Mikdash back. It's not hard. Right? Truth is, another thing, I think we said this last year, Milchemes HaYetzer is not hard either. You know that? It's not. No. I'll tell you, listen to this. Chavos HaTalmidim brings a medrash. Says, a man without arms and without legs, right? Just with a big stick leaning against his shoulder, was sitting at the crossroads. Every person who came by and said, I've got a stick. You don't give me your money, I'm going to hit you. And man's got a stick. You don't argue with the guy. Right? Everyone just gave him their money. Right? So, Ad Sheba Pikeach Echad. Right? One Pikeach came and said, he's got no arms and no legs. He took the stick and beat him up. And he says, Chazal says that's the Yetzer Hara. He just barks. No, he tempts you. Yeah, but, there isn't real strength, right? His strength is your lack of resistance. That's his strength. And he writes over there, it's not good what the Mashgichim do in the yeshivas and said the Yetzer Hara is very certain. The Bachrim are going to be misyayish. Right? And he says over there, try and exercise. Next time you feel a taiva, just go stamp your foot and say no. He says, you'll see. Try, just do it. You do it. Taiva subsides immediately. It's like, no. Do we even stamp the foot? No. Your master is calling. You run, right? That's the problem, right? And a Beis Mikdash means V'Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. There's no two masters, so you have to conduct your own affairs. That you have only one master. Yisrael's called a tamar. Yisrael Yeshem rak leiv echad lavim shabashamayim. You have HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your heart, in your Kodesh HaKadoshim, like with Nefesh HaChaim. That's when. A critical about Jews, that's where Baruch will be Master Shenosu B'Tzion B'Mher B'Meim.